The shelter groaned under the weight of the storm, a low, metallic wail that echoed through its narrow corridors. Lyra could feel the vibration through the soles of her boots, each shudder like a warning from the planet itself. A jagged crack had split the wall of the east wing, thin at first, then widening with a grinding moan. Through it seeped a breath of air so cold it burned her cheeks, carrying with it the hiss of the white void outside. Above, the sky was a bruised swirl of violet and black, and every few seconds a slash of electric blue lightning ripped it open, briefly illuminating the skeletal ridges of ice that surrounded the station. Each flash was followed by a deep, bone-snapping thunder that made the steel frame quiver. The storm had been building for hours, but now it was no longer just weather. It was siege. The oxygen monitor on her wrist pulsed red. 17 minutes remaining. That was with the shelter still sealed. If the breach widened, that number would drop fast. She backed away from the crack, eyes scanning the room. The overhead lights flickered, casting the shadow of her own body like a twitching silhouette against the bulkhead. Then she froze. Beyond the gap in the wall, in the shifting, blinding spray of snow, something moved. At first it was just a smudge against the white. Then the wind shifted, and the shape resolved, tall, hunched, moving with deliberate weight. Each step sank deep enough to leave a pit, and those pits stretched into the distance in a line that vanished into the storm. She couldn't tell if it was heading toward her or simply passing, but every instinct screamed danger. Her mind raced through possibilities. Scavenger drone? Fallen satellite? But neither would move like that. The only things that size out here were either dead or the kind of predator that made sure you were. The shelter shuddered again. Dust and ice crystals rained from the ceiling. The air temperature was dropping. She could feel it even through her insulated suit. Somewhere in the distance, a structural beam gave way with a brittle snap. She tapped her wrist unit, pulling up the external scan. Static. The storm's interference made the display useless. All she had was the number in the corner ticking down her breathable air. 16,042. Not enough time, she muttered under her breath. The ball of fear in her chest hardened into something sharper. She turned toward the equipment locker, wrenching it open. Her toolkit clattered into her hands. Spanners, arc cutter, thermal patches. Not weapons, which had made worse odds work before. The shadow outside shifted again. It was closer now. She caught a glimpse of its profile. A slope of shoulder, an arc that could be a jaw or a weapon mount. The wind screamed through the gap, bringing with it a sound so low she felt it more than heard it. It was not the wind. She knew, deep down, it was alive. Her pulse kicked up. She could try to seal the breach, buy herself an hour maybe. But if the thing out there wanted in, steel wouldn't stop it. And she had no illusions about what would happen if it caught her cornered. She glanced toward the emergency hatch on the far side of the room, the one that opened directly onto the ice plains. Beyond it was the storm, the cold, and, she now realized, something else. A glint. She stepped closer to the breach and squinted through the snow. Far off, a shard of light pierced the storm. Not the sterile glare of lightning, but a steady, unnatural green-blue glow. It pulsed faintly, like the slow beat of a massive heart. Her mind snapped back to the rumors she'd overheard during her transport to Erythra 9. Wreckage from the alien war scattered across the surface, most of it buried in ice, some of it still alive. She clenched her jaw. If that light was what she thought it was, it might be the only way to survive the next hour. Or it could kill her before the storm did. If I stay, I die. If I go out there... She didn't finish the thought. She didn't have to. The oxygen counter blinked, 15,059. The shadow outside took another step, and the snow seemed to recoil from it. The glow on the horizon flared again, brighter this time, haloed in the whiteout. She could feel the storm tugging at her, the wind like claws at the seams of her suit, urging her to make a choice. No more time. Lyra slung the toolkit across her back and sealed her helmet. The visor auto-tinted against the next flash of lightning. Her breath echoed inside the mask, too loud, too fast. She keyed the emergency hatch. With a metallic sigh, it slid open and the cold hit her like a wall. The world beyond was chaos. Snow flaying her skin, air so thin it sliced her lungs, visibility shredded to a few meters. Somewhere behind that curtain of white the shadow still moved, and somewhere beyond that the glow pulsed like a promise or a trap. She hesitated on the threshold, boots planted against the floor, every muscle taut. One step forward would mean leaving the last walls between her and whatever ruled this frozen hell. One step back would mean waiting here until the oxygen ran out or the wall gave way. She gripped the frame of the hatch, leaned forward into the storm. Faster death, she muttered. Maybe better death. Then she pushed off into the white. Snow hit her like shrapnel, stinging through the insulated weave of her suit. The wind roared in her ears, drowning out even her own breath. Each step sank to the knee in powder, the cold sucking heat from her legs. The light ahead burned brighter now, refracted in the ice like a beacon. It was closer than she'd thought, close enough that she could almost see the jagged silhouette around it. A hull. Alien design. She caught herself leaning toward it even as she fought to keep her balance. Behind her, faint but growing, came a sound that made the hair at the back of her neck rise, a guttural, rolling growl. Felt in her ribs more than heard. It was following. The wind swirled, and for a heartbeat the snow cleared just enough for her to glimpse it, a mass of shadow and muscle. Too many limbs, eyes like frozen lanterns fixed on her. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She forced herself not to look back again. The wreckage loomed, its torn flanks half buried in ice, glowing veins running through the metal like something alive. As she reached it, the light surged, flooding the storm with an otherworldly blue, and the growl behind her rose into a roar that rattled her bones. She pressed a hand to the alien hull, and the cold of the storm was replaced by another chill entirely, a deep, unnatural cold that sank past flesh and into the marrow. The storm howled, the shadow closed in, and somewhere inside the wreck something answered the roar. Lyra Calder had learned to stop counting the days since she'd been dropped on Erythra. 9. Time meant nothing here. The sun was a dim smear on the horizon, the cold never loosened its grip, and survival was measured in oxygen, minutes, and calories burned. The world outside her shelter was a frozen graveyard, the bones of machines and beasts alike buried under centuries of ice. She'd been exiled here under the guise of reassignment, but she knew better. Her name had been blacklisted. And somewhere in the higher offices of the Terran Alliance, a red flag marked her for termination if she ever set foot on a human world again. The crime was never spoken aloud in the official records, but she could recite it from memory: unauthorized whistleblowing, theft of intellectual property, endangerment of classified assets. The truth was simpler and far uglier. She had built something they wanted and refused to let them steal it quietly. The design had been hers from the first sketch: autonomous combat drones capable of navigating the deep ice fissures and delivering precision strikes against the frost titans that plagued the outer colonies. For 2 years she'd refined them, programmed them, tested them. They had worked brilliantly, lethally, and then, in the space of a single council meeting, the project had been taken from her. A month later, after a malfunction during deployment cost a platoon their lives, the blame had been placed squarely on her shoulders. She could still remember the moment they read her sentence, the way the faces of her peers had blurred together into one cold, bureaucratic mask. Engineer Lyra Calder, you are hereby reassigned to indefinite field service on Erythra 9 without recall rights. No one mentioned the unspoken addendum. If she found her way home, she wouldn't last the night. Now she lived in the shadow of her own creation's absence. Every titan roar that rolled across the ice was a reminder that the drones could have stopped them. Every shift of the ice under her boots was a whisper of the lives lost because they had stolen her work and broken it. She hated them for that. But more than the theft, more than the betrayal, she hated the injustice. She hated the way they had erased her voice and left her to rot. And yet, for all the bitterness, she didn't call herself a hero. Heroes had something worth dying for. She was still looking for something worth living for. Nights were the worst, when the wind died just enough for the static on her comm to clear, and she could catch snippets of other transmissions drifting in from the storm. Traders on the outer rim, scavenger crews, desperate distress calls that the Alliance would never answer. That was how she first heard the whispers, half-mad accounts from miners who had tunneled too deep, from soldiers who had gone into the glacier valleys, and not all returned. They spoke of a creature older than the ice itself, a warlord from the alien empire that had fought humanity to a standstill a century ago. They called her the Predator Queen. The name alone was enough to make seasoned fighters go pale. The legend said she had commanded legions of biomechanical beasts, had leveled entire cities in the span of a night, and had turned against her own kind when they tried to take her crown. The war had ended before her fate was certain. Some claimed she was destroyed, others that she had been bound and buried beneath the ice by both sides, the only time humans and aliens had ever joined forces willingly. Lyra dismissed the stories at first. This planet had more ghosts than living things, and superstition was as common as frostbite. But sometimes, when the auroras flared blood-red and the storm paused like it was holding its breath, she swore she could feel something under the ice, something vast and patient, listening. She told herself it was just the mind playing tricks in the silence. Yet the whispers persisted, passed from one frozen survivor to another. One night, In the crackling haze of an overloaded radio, she heard the question spoken plainly by a voice she couldn't place. If the only thing that could save you was the very thing that almost destroyed your world, would you set it free? The words stuck with her long after the transmission faded. She found herself replaying them when she stripped down her tools for maintenance, when she patched the seams in her suit, when she stared at the horizon and wondered how many more days she could endure. What would she do if she stood before the Predator Queen? Could she bargain with something that had no reason to show mercy? And if she could, if she did, would she still be herself when it was over? Lyra had no answers. But she knew the ice had a way of forcing choices on those who hesitated. Out here, hesitation was just another word for death. The wreck loomed out of the storm like the spine of some ancient beast half buried in ice, torn metal glinting under the pale glow of alien circuitry. Lyra trudged forward, snow stinging her visor, each step sinking into the crusted surface until she reached a jagged opening in the hull. The air here was different, still frigid, but tinged with a metallic tang that carried an electric hum through her gloves. She ducked inside, the howl of the wind muffled instantly, replaced by the slow, resonant thrum of something alive. The walls were slick with frost, etched in symbols that pulsed faintly with blue light. The deeper she moved, the stronger the sound became, a rhythm too deliberate to be mere machinery. It wasn't until she stepped into the chamber at the heart of the wreck that she saw it. A massive frame of biomechanical armor, its plating etched with the same alien script, standing upright as if waiting for someone to climb inside. Frost covered most of it, but beneath the ice she could see the faint shimmer of something organic, as though muscle and metal had fused. She reached out, her gloved fingertips brushing the cold surface of the chest plate. Instantly, a shudder ran through the suit's frame, and the armor's core lit from within, casting the chamber in a ghostly light. The heartbeat-like thrum intensified, and she realized it wasn't coming from the walls. It was coming from the armor itself. Every pulse sent a shock of unnatural cold up her arm, not just skin-deep, but straight into her bones, making her jaw clench. Behind her, the sound of shifting metal made her turn. The jagged entrance she'd come through was sealing itself, massive panels sliding into place with a hiss, while outside, the storm's roar was replaced by the muffled grind of ice collapsing. Her way out was being buried. She spun back toward the armor, and that was when she heard it. Clear, sharp, and not coming from any speaker she could see. It was inside her head. "You touch my throne," the voice said, smooth but edged with something predatory. "Who dares?" Lyra's breath fogged inside her helmet. "I'm the only one left here," she said aloud, unsure if speaking mattered. "If we both want to survive, we're going to have to work together." A low, humorless laugh rippled through her skull. "I do not help the weak," the voice replied. "Strength is the only coin I take." "Are you ready to kill to live?" She swallowed, feeling the cold seep deeper, as if the voice itself was rooting into her. "I'm ready to win," she said, her tone flat. "Kill, if I have to." The armor seemed to lean toward her without moving, its glowing core flaring brighter in time with the voice. "We will see." The chest plate split open like the ribs of a great beast, revealing an interior lined with cables that writhed like tendrils, slick and glistening. A wave of cold air surged out, carrying with it the faint scent of ozone and something far older, something that spoke of predator's breath in the dark. She hesitated, instinct telling her to step back, to find another way out. But the grind of ice behind her reminded her she didn't have the luxury of choice. The chamber was dimming as the entrance disappeared under snow and frost. She reached forward, placing her hand fully on the armor's inner surface. The cables twitched, wrapping around her wrist with a pulse that matched the alien heartbeat. It was like being gripped by a creature that could crush her without effort, yet it didn't. At least, not yet. "Once you enter, you will not leave me," the voice said. "You would be mine until the ice takes us both." She clenched her jaw, forcing down the shiver that wasn't just from the cold. "Then let's make sure the ice takes something else first." The armor's tendrils slid up her arms, across her shoulders, encasing her torso in living metal. She could feel its weight settle into her muscles, the alien system syncing with her movements in jagged, disjointed bursts. For a moment her vision swam, overlays of strange symbols flashing across her visor, and with them came impressions, images of towering beasts wreathed in frost, battles fought under shattered moons, and the face of a figure crowned in bone and steel, the Predator Queen. The voice sharpened, each word a blade. "Prove you are worth the steel you wear. If you fail, I will not die alone." Somewhere deep beneath the wreck, the ice groaned, and a distant roar rolled upward like the warning of something massive and hungry. Lyra's hands flexed inside the armor, the alien servos humming to life. She knew that whatever was coming would not wait for her to adjust, and from the tone of the Queen's voice, neither would she. The ice beneath Lyra's boots trembled first, a faint vibration that ran up her legs and into her spine. Then it deepened into a grinding rumble, the kind that came when entire glaciers shifted. The predator, Queen's voice cut through her thoughts, sharp and alert. It wakes. A line of frost split open 20 meters ahead, hissing vapor into the freezing air. The ground bulged, then shattered, and something massive erupted upward. The Titan's head broke the surface first, horned, plated in crystalline ice, its eyes burning with cold blue fire. It hauled itself free, with arms like siege towers, claws biting into the ice. Every step it took sent shock waves that cracked the frozen plain around them. Lyra steadied her stance, the alien armor adjusting to her balance in half-second jerks. She wanted to guide the movement, but the Queen kept pulling at her reflexes, snatching control whenever she hesitated. "Stay out of my head," Lyra growled, scanning for weak points as the Titan roared. The sound wasn't just noise, it was layered, resonant, a deep bass that made the armor's plates vibrate. Snow cascaded from nearby ridges, and then, horrifyingly, a second note joined the first. "It calls the pack," the Queen said. "Kill it before the others hear." The Titan lunged, slamming both fists into the ice where Lyra had stood seconds before. She dove aside, the servos in her legs amplifying her speed, but not fast enough on her own. At the last instant, her right arm jerked up on its own, deflecting a spray of ice shards that would have shredded her visor. "I said stay out," she snapped. "And I said you'll die without me," the Queen replied, her tone like iron snapping in the cold. The Titan swung again, this time in a wide arc meant to catch her mid-step. Lyra ducked under it, sliding across the ice and firing the armor's forearm blasters. Bolts of alien energy struck the Titan's shoulder, blasting chunks of ice away to reveal sinewy muscle beneath. But it hardly slowed. It turned with a grinding roar, claws gouging deep trenches as it bore down on her. "Aim for the core, below the sternum," the Queen instructed, not asking. "I know where to hit it," Lyra shot back, leaping aside as another claw smashed into the ground, showering her with frozen debris. She darted in, aiming a blow at the exposed flesh, but the Queen seized partial control of her arm mid-strike, twisting it just enough to land deeper, nearer the Titan's chest. Pain flared up her own shoulder from the force of the impact. The Titan bellowed, staggering back a step, then slammed both feet down in unison. The ice cracked in a circle around them, a jagged maw opening beneath Lyra's feet. She almost fell before the Queen yanked her sideways, hard enough to make her teeth clack. "You're slowing us down," the Queen said, voice low and cold. "If I let you lead, we both die." "If I let you lead," Lyra shot back, panting, "I'll be gone before the fight is over. You'll wear my body like a suit, better a suit than a corpse." The Titan lunged again, but this time Lyra met it head-on. The armor's legs powered forward, closing the distance faster than the beast expected. At the last moment she dropped low, sliding under its swinging arm and driving her left fist into the back of its knee. The joint shattered with a crunch of ice and tendon. The Titan roared, collapsing to one side, but even as it fell, its head jerked upward, releasing another layered bellow into the frozen air. "Yow!" The call echoed, reverberating across the plain. In the far distance, other roars answered. "You took too long," the Queen said. "Now they come." "Then we finish this," Lyra replied through clenched teeth. The Titan, even crippled, was still lethal. It spun on its good leg, swinging its tail, a jagged length of ice and bone toward her. Lyra ducked, the tip grazing her helmet with a sharp clang. She darted in again, the Queen pressing into her reflexes, guiding her arm's trajectory. Lyra fought to keep some control, refusing to surrender entirely, and the internal tug-of-war made the armor's movements jerky, uneven. The Titan swiped again, this time catching her side. The impact rattled her ribs and sent her sliding across the ice. Systems flared red on her HUD, screaming damage alerts. The Queen's voice was a whip-crack in her skull. "You will die, stubborn, and alone." Lyra forced herself upright, wincing. "I'd rather die me than live as you." She sprinted forward, ignoring the armor's attempt to overcompensate for her movements. The Titan raised its arms to block, but Lyra feinted left, then leapt straight up, the servos in her legs driving her into the air. The Queen seized the moment, pouring raw power into the jump, sending her higher than she'd intended. She came down with all that momentum, her right fist cocked back, alien energy gathering along the plating. The strike hit dead center in the Titan's chest, punching through the ice armor, through flesh, until her gauntleted hand closed around something pulsing with heat. the creature's core. With a wordless roar of her own, she drove the energy through it. The core shattered, light spilling from the wound in blinding arcs. The Titan's roar choked off mid-bellow as its massive frame convulsed, then collapsed in a shower of ice and steaming vapor. Lyra staggered back, chest heaving, watching the carcass settle into the snow. The distant answering roars were louder now, closer. She flexed her gauntlet, readying herself for the next fight, then froze. On the back of her armored hand, faint but unmistakable, a new mark was etched into the plating. It wasn't part of the original design. The alien script glowed faintly, curling in a sigil she didn't recognize. But she didn't need translation to understand it. Ownership. The Queen's voice was softer now, almost satisfied. "Now you are mine." Lyra clenched her fist until the plates groaned. "Not yet," she muttered, but the mark burned cold against her skin, and deep down she knew it wasn't a threat she could ignore. The sky above Erythra 9 burned with a savage light, the auroras twisting into ribbons of crimson that bled across the horizon. The sight was wrong. Auroras here were pale green or ghostly blue, never red and never this intense. Lyra knew it wasn't beauty, it was warning. The air around her shimmered faintly with heat, a contradiction in this frozen wasteland, and cracks spiderwebbed across the ice under her boots. Somewhere deep below, entire glaciers were groaning, shifting, releasing the monsters trapped within. The first roars came from the east, low, resonant, and powerful enough to make the alien armor's plates hum against her skin. Another answered from the west, then another, until the air was thick with the calls of awakening titans. One had been a fight. Two would have been impossible. Dozens meant the end of everything on this planet that could draw breath. Her HUD flickered with heat signatures, massive, moving, converging. "Predator!" Queen's voice cut through, sharp and electric. "They come to reclaim the world, but it will not be theirs. It will be mine." Lyra's chest tightened. "Yours?" The Queen's laugh was low, curling like smoke. "I did not endure centuries in the ice to serve as your weapon. I will take back what was mine before your kind learn to walk upright." "And what happens to the people stranded here?" Lyra asked, already knowing the answer. "The miners, the scavengers, the ones barely holding on." "Collateral," the Queen said without hesitation. "The weak perish, the strong remain. We are strong." Lyra stopped moving, her boots skidding slightly on the trembling ice. "You don't care who dies, you just want a throne." "I am a queen," the voice replied, all silk and venom. "And I will not apologize for ruling." A fissure split open to her left, heat billowing up from the depths. A Titan's clawed hand gripped the edge, dragging its bulk toward the surface. Beyond it, the shapes of others were rising, their ice-armored forms framed in the blood-red glow. Every instinct screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. The storm still raged in the distance, and the wreck behind it was collapsing into the meltwater. "We can still stop them," the Queen pressed, "but not like this. You hold back, you doubt. You cling to control as if it were worth more than survival." "It is not. Control is the only thing I have left," Lyra snapped. "If I let you take over completely, we will live," the Queen interrupted. "And they will not. That is the truth, and truth is the only mercy I offer." The Titans advanced, their massive forms blotting out chunks of the horizon. The ice shook with each step, water pooling in the cracks, steam rising into the already stifling air. Her HUD warned of structural collapse across the plains. She realized with a jolt that it wasn't just the Titans threatening to destroy the planet. It was the rapid thaw itself. The entire surface could give way, swallowing them into the boiling chasms below. The Queen's tone shifted, lower now, more intimate, like the press of a blade against her neck. "Choose," Lyra called her. "Break the armor and die here as yourself, or join with me and live as more than you ever dreamed. There is no third path." "So those are my options," Lyra said, her voice steady despite the chaos closing in. "Death or something worse." "Not worse," the Queen said. "Different. Eternal." Lyra's pulse hammered in her ears. She looked down at her hands encased in alien metal, flexing the fingers. Every time she'd fought alongside the Queen, it had felt like dancing with a predator. Graceful, powerful, but never hers to lead. To give herself over completely meant surrendering more than movement. It meant letting the Queen thread her will. To every thought, every breath, she glanced at the closest Titan, its eyes blazing like frozen suns as it hauled itself from the ice. Behind it, another loomed, and another. Heat distorted the air in waves, the sky dripping red as if bleeding from the clouds. "They will tear you apart," the Queen whispered almost gently, "unless you let me in. And if I do, we will tear them apart instead." Lyra's jaw tightened. "And when they're gone?" Then we will decide what to do with the world we have saved. We! Lyra's voice was sharp, a scalpel to the Queen's velvet. Or you, the Queen chuckled. Semantics. The nearest Titan let out a roar so loud it rattled her bones, then charged. Lyra braced, armor servos whining, but even as she set her stance, she knew she couldn't win like this. Not against all of them, not alone. And yet the thought of handing herself over fully made her stomach knot. The Queen must have felt it, because her voice slid into her mind again, cool and certain. You can cling to your scraps of control and die, or you can live long enough to make choices that matter. The Titan leapt, its massive shadow swallowing her in an instant. Lyra made her choice. Fine, she said, the word ripped from her throat. Take it! The armor's core flared, flooding her with cold light. She felt her limbs move without hesitation, her vision sharpening until every fracture in the Titan's armor was clear. Every weak joint a target. Power surged, intoxicating and terrifying. The Queen's presence wrapped around her like coiled steel, not just guiding her, but fusing with her thoughts until she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Together they met the Titan's charge with a precision and ferocity that was almost beautiful, dodging under its swing, striking its exposed flank, driving it back step by step. The other Titans roared in answer, but she barely heard them over the rush of shared power. Somewhere beneath the swell of that strength, a fragment of her own mind remained untouched, buried deep, hidden where the Queen couldn't yet reach. She nurtured it quietly, feeding it with the one thought she could still call her own. When the time comes, I will turn this against you. The ice plains had become a battlefield, a shifting, cracking expanse that groaned under the weight of monsters. Titans emerged from every direction, their massive forms silhouetted against the bleeding sky. The heat had risen so sharply that steam coiled up from fissures in the ice, and each step they took sent new fractures racing across the surface. Lyra stood in the center of it all, the alien armor fused to her body, Predator Queen's presence woven through every nerve. Power surged in her veins, raw, relentless, and intoxicating. When the first Titan charged, they moved as one. Her legs powered forward in great, ground-devouring strides, her gauntleted fists punching through armor that had once seemed impenetrable. Each strike was decisive, guided by the Queen's predatory precision, and the Titan fell with a roar that shook the horizon. Another came from behind. Without turning, they spun, driving a blade of condensed energy from the armor's wrist through its chest. A third tried to flank, only to be caught mid-leap, slammed into the ice so hard the ground splintered into a yawning chasm that swallowed it whole. They fought in a rhythm of violence. Leap, strike, crush, move, each motion seamless, terrifying in its efficiency. But as the bodies piled around them and the Queen's laughter filled her mind, Lyra began to feel the shift. The Queen wasn't just directing their blows, she was taking more control of their movements, more of Lyra's focus. The thoughts in her head no longer felt entirely her own. The voice that told her where to move, where to strike, had stopped sounding like an ally and started sounding like a ruler giving orders. Now, the Queen's voice echoed, we finish them and claim what is ours. Lyra struck down another Titan, its core exploding in a blinding arc of light, but she no longer answered. She felt the Queen pressing deeper like frost spreading through glass, seeping into every decision. And then she felt it, that subtle pull toward something final, irreversible. The Queen wasn't satisfied with victory. She wanted permanence. She wanted the vessel. The next Titan's charge was met with a blast of concentrated energy that vaporized its chest. The Queen's presence surged in the aftermath, sliding through the opening that combat's adrenaline had left in Lyra's mind. Let go, the Queen whispered. Let me stay. Lyra gritted her teeth, keeping her body in motion, cutting through another beast's knee, driving an elbow into its throat. All the while she counted the seconds in her head, waiting for the right moment. The Queen pushed harder, her influence flooding every channel of the neural interface. Lyra felt her fingers twitch against her will, felt her mouth curl into a smile that wasn't hers. The Queen's voice dropped into something close to reverence. When this ends, you and I will be one forever. Not quite, Lyra muttered. She ducked under the swipe of a Titan's massive claw, vaulting over its arm, and slammed both gauntlets into its skull. As its body crumpled, she triggered the subroutine she'd built in secret, the fragment of code she'd embedded deep in the armor systems the moment she realized what the Queen really wanted. It ignited in her mind like a flare, sending a spike of static through the neural link. The Queen's confident tone broke into a snarl. What have you done? Finishing what I started, Lyra said, driving another blow into the Titan's head as the code spread. The armor shuddered violently, the lights in its plates flickering. Lyra's vision blurred as the Queen's presence thrashed inside her skull, trying to force its way back into control. "You would kill us both?" the Queen hissed. "No," Lyra said, her voice flat. "Just you." She routed the code's final command directly into the core's energy conduit. The neural link screamed with feedback as the Queen's consciousness was pulled, thread by thread, out of her mind and into the armor's central power source. The Titans, still standing, hesitated, their movements faltering as if they, too, felt the shift. One roared, lunging toward her, but without the Queen's influence, Lyra found the armor still obeyed. "Still, hearse!" She sidestepped, letting it crash into the fissure at her feet. Another tried to flank, and she drove a gauntleted fist straight into its chest, shattering bone and ice. By the time the last Titan fell, the battlefield was silent except for the hiss of steam from the broken ground. Lyra stood in the stillness, her breath loud in her ears. The armor was quiet now. The Queen's voice was gone, or so she thought. Then, faintly from deep within the core, the voice returned, contained but still sharp. "You are the most dangerous thing I have ever met." Lyra looked down at her gauntlet, flexing her fingers over the glowing plates. "I know," she said simply, and turned away from the field of corpses, leaving the Queen locked behind the walls she had built. The wreck of the battlefield still smoked behind her, steam curling up from fissures where Titans had fallen and the ice had given way. Lyra stood alone on the fractured plain, the alien armor heavy around her but no longer whispering in her mind. The Predator Queen was silent now, locked deep inside the core, a prisoner in her own throne. Above, the sky's bloody auroras were fading back to their pale green shimmer, the unnatural heat receding as if the world itself exhaled in relief. She turned toward the horizon, where a faint beacon from a shelter blinked through the thinning storm. The fight was over, but her pulse was still sharp with adrenaline and something colder. This wasn't victory, not the clean kind. She'd survived, yes, but with the Queen's mark still burned into the gauntlet at her wrist, faint but unerasable. Somewhere the Queen was waiting, and Lyra knew she would never stop looking for cracks in her cage. She trudged across the ice until she reached the half-collapsed wreck of the alien ship, its jagged hull still pulsing faintly with power. Inside, she found the battered transmitter she'd seen when she first arrived, its long-range array still intact. She worked quickly, rerouting power from the armor into the console, forcing the circuits to life. The comm screen flickered, then glowed steady. Her hands moved over the controls, punching in a frequency she knew would bounce off half a dozen relay stations before it reached the Terran Alliance, and every outpost and scavenger crew listening along the border. "This is Lyra Calder," she began, her voice low but steady. "Some of you know my name. Some of you know the charges against me. All of you should know the truth. The Titans here are dead. The Predator Queen lives contained. For now." She paused, letting the static stretch between sentences. "I've seen what this armor can do, what she can do. And I've seen how easily power like this turns into something worse than the enemy you're fighting." Her gaze drifted to the mark on her gauntlet, the alien script glowing faintly in the dim light. "I'm sending this as a warning and a challenge. If you think you can take her from me, try." She keyed the encryption, letting the message compress into a tight burst signal. It would carry far and fast, impossible to retract. When she hit transmit, the console hummed, and somewhere far above, a thin beam of data shot into the dark. She shut the system down and stood for a moment in the silence that followed, the cold air burning her lungs. By the time she made it back to the shelter, the wind had picked up again. The storm wasn't as bad as the one that had driven her to the wreck, but the horizon was already blurring under its white veil. She sealed the hatch behind her and stripped off the armor, letting it stand in the corner like the hulking shadow of everything that had happened. The gauntlet still bore the Queen's sigil, and when she caught herself staring at it, she turned away. In the days that followed, rumors spread faster than her signal. At the fringe stations, they called her the Beast Binder, the engineer who chained a queen. In the trade channels, her name was said with a mix of respect and wariness. Some wanted to find her, to learn from her. Others wanted the armor. A few wanted revenge. Lyra didn't care which came first. She'd chosen to make herself visible, knowing it would draw all three. The more eyes on her, the more pressure on the Queen's prison. If anyone thought they could do better, they'd have to come through her first. Sitting at the small table in her shelter, she began to record a final note to attach to the broadcast. Not for the outposts or scavengers, but for anyone who might face the choice she had. "Power," she said into the recorder, "is a blade with no hilt. Hold it too tight, and it will cut your hand open. Let it go too soon, and it will kill whoever stands behind you. The only way to use it is to know when to grip and when to release, and to accept that either way, There will be blood. She leaned back, staring at the frost creeping along the window. The Predator Queen thought that strength was just about surviving longer than everyone else. She was wrong. It's about knowing what you're willing to lose to protect what you can't replace. She stopped the recording and keyed in the final line, her voice quieter now, but no less clear. What will you do when saving humanity means gambling your soul on a killer who's ended millions of lives? She sent it before she could second-guess herself. The message vanished into the encrypted relay network, gone from her hands but not from her mind. Outside, the wind howled again, scouring the ice. The auroras were faint now, just a ghost of the earlier fury. But Lyra knew the quiet wouldn't last. It never did. Somewhere, deep in the armor's core, the Queen stirred faintly, like a prisoner pacing in a cell. Lyra didn't speak to her. She didn't have to. Both of them understood that this wasn't over. When the knock came on her comms console days later, an encrypted ping from an unknown source. Lyra smiled faintly. Someone had heard her challenge. Maybe it was help. Maybe it was trouble. Maybe both. She flexed her fingers, the gauntlet plates whispering against each other. "Come on, then," she murmured, and opened the channel.